Many mysterious events seem so unbelievable that they still pose many questions that remain unanswered. In this video, let's take a look at the most interesting, spooky mystical events that cannot be disproved. The so-called Washington Carousel is the rare case where an observed UFO stumps experts. Scientists, the military, and the government have been unable to provide any plausible explanation. On July 19, 1952, at about 11 o'clock in the evening, a group of 7 unidentified objects was picked up by the radar at Washington's Dallas airport. They flew chaotically, and every now and then they changed directions abruptly without turning around. The UFOs were traveling toward the U.S. Capitol at speeds in excess of 2,000 kilometers per hour and as high as 11,000. That was 52 years ago, but the problem is also that according to the air services, there could not have been any planes in the area at that moment. The incident could have been written off as an equipment malfunction, but for one thing. The radar of military base Andrews, which was only 20 kilometers from the center of the city, had also detected strange objects. Understandably, it responded to requests from dispatchers and in the bosom. It could not have been missiles, because the incredible maneuverability of the UFO quickly dispelled these fears. No rocket is capable of doing something like that. And the most symbolic thing is that soon after the UFOs appeared, they hovered over the Capitol and the residence of the U.S. president. The leadership of the country did not tolerate such insolence from the uninvited guests and sent fighter jets to intercept them. Having noticed the planes, the UFOs disappeared, but soon returned again. And then the pilots assured us that these flying balls seemed to follow their actions and purposefully evaded their encounters. The objects glowed strangely, and so their contours seemed to be blurred. Then instruments would show that each of them had a diameter of about 40 meters. The UFOs, according to the radar data, were made of metal and were moving in sync, then diverging in different directions. A week later, the dreary returned to the night. One of the military pilots risked flying up to the objects, and the UFOs suddenly surrounded him. The objects simply accompanied the plane for a while, but then fled. According to the pilot's descriptions, the unidentified objects looked like giant balls with a white glow emanating from them. There were no casualties in the course of the story. Nevertheless, it began to cause serious concern to the U.S. government. This was followed by an order requiring pilots to attack UFOs. This despite the fact that the pilots never even managed to get within striking distance. At some point, the UFOs never came back. The government ran an entire campaign to make this mysterious phenomenon quickly forgotten, and at press conferences the military attributed the phenomenon to natural factors, in particular air inversion. Too much of a stretch, don't you think? And the following story can neither confirm nor deny, but it does sound very eerie. On July 14, 1911, a pleasure train left Rome's train station. It was a so-called cruise arranged by the Sonite firm for wealthy Italians. 106 passengers were taking in the sights surrounding the new stretch of road. The train was approaching the very long Lombard Tunnel, but just before the tunnel the train suddenly slowed down and suddenly something terrible began to happen. Only 2 passengers managed to jump off the train, and the events that followed are already known from their words. One of them, Senor Sogina, described the details of the incident in the Roman Herald. I heard some indistinct humming behind the black smoke of the locomotive. A milky white fog suddenly became clearly visible, crawling out of the mouth of the tunnel. This fog, like a wave, covered the steam locomotive. Behind it, in the fog, the first car of our ill-starred train disappeared. It was terrifying. I jumped out of the wagon and onto the ground. The train was barely pulling. From the corner of my eye, I noticed that one more person jumped off with me. We both hit the ground, and I don't remember anything else. The train entered the tunnel, but never came out the other side. It disappeared without a trace. It should be noted that this tunnel is just a kilometer-long pipe with rails, without any branches, and can be seen right through. After the disappearance of the tunnel and all its surroundings were thoroughly inspected and examined, but no trace of either the train or the passengers could be found. Frightened by the precedent, the Italian railway authorities chose to close the tunnel to traffic and even walled up its exits. Unsuccessful attempts to find the missing train, or at least understand what happened to it, continued for several more decades, until an air bomb completely destroyed the walled tunnel during World War II. The mystery of the missing train is still unsolved. The next event, perhaps the most well-known and documented, is the crash of an unidentified object in the 20th century. On July 2, 1947, a light disc-shaped object flew at low altitude and high speed over New Mexico. The next day, a pile of indistinct debris caught the eye of a farmer named William Brazil. The debris lay about 7 to 10 miles from where the UFO was seen, but judging by the calculated trajectory, exactly in the path of the object. Brazil immediately notified the local authorities of the discovery. Soon a research team from the 509th Intelligence Branch arrived on the scene. Immediately, the discovery was classified. The wreckage was painstakingly collected and transported to Wright Field, an air base in Ohio. All civilian personnel were prohibited from approaching Hangar 29, where the find was placed. Air Force ground crews who saw the wreckage were not allowed to talk to the media. The military said the mysterious pile of metal found near the wreckage belonged to a new type of military meter balloon that had crashed. Except there were too many oddities in the case. William Brazil, who discovered the wreckage, was detained, ostensibly for questioning, and was isolated from people for a week. Then, when the excitement died down, he was released without explanation. When a radio station in Albuquerque insinuated that the alien wreckage had been found, the Air Force immediately intervened, demanding that the transfer be stopped. Over the past 15 years, researchers have interviewed more than 160 witnesses who knew directly or indirectly anything about the find in New Mexico. Of these testimonies, the most impressive are the words of Major Jess Marcel, the intelligence officer who was in charge of the initial cover-up operation of the incident. Marcel stated that the material he was dealing with had nothing to do with Earth. One scrap of the lightest metal foil was so strong that even a 16-pound hammer did not leave a single mark on it, and his words were confirmed by many other witnesses. According to enthusiasts, the U.S. government has discovered and is still keeping the remains of several alien vehicle crashes a secret. But in any case, the Roswell incident is still a top-secret case. And the next mysterious event was witnessed by tens of thousands of French people on December 30th, 1902. Paris, the night. At 5 minutes past 2, in the city, virtually all pendulum clocks stopped. Scientific publications of the time about this incredible event said that at that moment many Parisians felt dizzy with nausea and fainting. The director of the Central Meteorological Station of Paris at the time officially stated that no atmospheric anomalies were observed during the entire time. The seismographs did not note a single instance of ground shaking. However, according to experts, it was some kind of geophysical phenomenon because only pendulum and spring clocks were becoming. The Paris breakdown had no effect on the mothernick in the clock oscillating under the force of the Earth's gravity. This simultaneous stopping of all the pendulums could have occurred if, say, the force of the Earth's gravity had been removed in one fell swoop that night in Paris and the world was in a state of weightlessness. And since this is impossible, it remains to assume that there were oscillations in phase, opposite to the oscillations of the pendulum, and when summing up the oscillations, they were mutually destroyed. Even in our time, it is impossible to imagine a device capable of such a thing. In the aftermath, many versions about this incident were put forward, but most likely the real truth about this event we will never know. There is no official data about this experiment. The U.S. Navy does not comment on any information about it, but many researchers believe that on October 28, 1943, U.S. military scientists conducted an unusual and terrible experiment. What happened that day? The U.S. military had the task of creating an invisible ship that would be invisible to the eyes and locators of the enemy. The essence of the experiment was that scientists tried to generate an extremely powerful electromagnetic field on the military destroyer, through which light and radio waves would be forced to circle the ship. But the experiment did not go as planned at once. On July 22, 1943, the ship in the dock, after turning on the equipment, was first enveloped in a greenish light and then completely disappeared from view down to the waterline. After the generators were turned off and the ship appeared, several sailors literally disappeared from the ship, while others were in pain all over their bodies. They turned out to be completely insane. It would seem that after such dreadful consequences, one should have postponed new experiments, but the Second World War was going on. On October 28, 1943, the destroyer Eldridge was taken out into the ocean and the electromagnetic system was turned on again. The equipment was corrected, but even this time the experiment went wrong. First the ship became translucent, and then a bright blue flash followed and the ship disappeared. And, this time completely soon, it really did appear, but not along with the experiment, but 500 kilometers from the place of the experiment, in Norfolk, Virginia, where it was seen by hundreds of people. The ship then unknowingly reappeared at the site of the experiment. Of the entire crew of nearly 200, only 21 sailors returned unharmed. Most of the crew was missing. Several more were literally melted into the ship's structure by them, and some of the sailors died of burns and electrocution. Be that as it may, there is in fact no fully reliable information at this time. All of the ship's sailors whom the press was able to talk to either denied what had happened or remained silent. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and write what you think about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support is very important to me.